when you stay in that ambiguity, like I did for way too many years, once you're out of it, you're like, darn, those are years I cannot get back. I don't want anybody to have to live in that any longer than they absolutely have to.
So one of the most horrible and seemingly impossible questions to answer is this one. Should I stay in a relationship or is it time to go? Most people who are grappling with this question have lots of good reasons on both sides of this equation, and it can be terribly stressful to sort through. And many people feel genuinely stuck in this state of ambivalence as they're trying to figure out the best path forward. And so that's why on today's episode of Love, Happiness, and Success, we are going there. I have invited a relationship researcher to talk about how to assess this situation more objectively to help you get clarity about the next best step for you. So that's what we're doing today. And I'm so excited you're here. And if this is your first time tuning in, welcome to Love, Happiness, and Success. This is the podcast where growth-oriented people like you come to learn how to build more satisfying relationships, develop themselves, and actualize their life's mission. And Dr. Merideth Thompson is a good example of what this evolutionary process looks like in action. We were just chatting before we started recording, and Dr. Merideth, you were talking about how your own life experiences turned into this amazing labor of love that is the Partner Lab. And let's just start right there.
Sure. Yes, I got divorced about 9, almost 10 years ago, and it was at least 10 years too late. And I was, for that many years, stuck in that ambivalent place. Like, should I go? Should I stay? And really, for the most part, I stayed because what we hear so often is you stay for the children. It's best for the children. And so after we did split and I just recognized how much agony I'd been in for so long, I was like, there has to be some sort of help. That's kind of the path that I went down to try and figure out, like, what is out there. And I just really wasn't finding very much. And especially being a social science researcher, I think I knew there was probably research out there that might help me. And I don't know if I just decided not to consult it because too much, or if I didn't want to consult it because I was afraid of what it might tell me.
So I know your background. You are a business professor. You have degrees in organizational psychology. You are a self-described relationship science nerd. And I just think it's so cool that you took these different disciplines and these abilities that you had, particularly around research, to be like, there's got to be a better way. And so take us into that. So ultimately, and you guys listening, the headline here is that Dr. Merideth created a assessment tool that is based on research. But I want to hear more about the research. Like, as you started digging into this, where did you go to help answer that question?
There's one particular study that totally grabbed my attention by a relationship science researcher named Samantha Joel. She does amazing stuff, and she has this massive meta-analysis where she looked at the biggest drivers of health and happiness in relationships, romantic relationships in particular. And I think she assessed like 50 of them. And she found 5 to 6 that really stand out. And the thing that was so interesting to me about this is a lot of them are really focused on our perceptions. So it's, issues with the other person's behavior or our own behavior can feed in, but it's really, what is our experience in our romantic relationship? So the biggest component is partner commitment, how much we perceive our partner is committed to the relationship. Do I really believe my partner is truly in this relationship with me? Or are they, checked out mentally, emotionally, physically? The second biggest one is having appreciation for our partner. So a lot of times people may think, oh, it's got to be, do I feel appreciated by my partner? That's not the biggest factor. Like, if I appreciate my partner, if I see the value in them, that's going to drive relationship quality a whole lot more, and happiness, health in that relationship. Is that into your question? At least in part.
Yeah, those are two. Are there others?
The third one really is our own sexual satisfaction.
Okay.
So do we feel, I think this may look different for men versus women, but, some other things I think are subsumed under this. It's hard to have sexual satisfaction if you don't feel safe with your partner, emotionally, physically, mentally, whatever it is. And so I think there are some precursors to these, but our own sexual satisfaction, if things are good in the bedroom, or as I like to joke, on the kitchen counter, then we're going to be happier. If we're going to feel more comfortable and feel accepted for who we are. And then the fourth one is believing that our partner is satisfied. Like, are they happy in the relationship? If we feel like our partner's not happy, it's really hard, to get comfortable, because you're wondering, where's this going to go? Can I do anything to make things better? And then conflict, high conflict situations, which is something I kind of learned after my divorce. High conflict relationships, it tends to be better for the children if the couple splits. But if you're having a lot of disagreements that are really disrespectful, draining, destructive, or that never really get solved, I've heard a lot of people talk about that. Like, they would try and have a conversation, but nothing really came out of it. It was just like airing of the grievances and then nothing else. And so, and then two, partner responsiveness. There's a lot of research on this, and the Gottmans talk about this a lot, those bids for attention. And, I think that one is super important, and probably in some ways harder to do now with so much technology. Like, you have to be super intentional when your partner makes a bid for your attention to ensure that you are giving them that eyeball to eyeball contact.
Put down the phone.
Put down the phone. Yes. Yeah. It is one thing that I distinctly remember in my prior marriage, like trying to get eyeball to eyeball contact at the end of the day and have a meaningful conversation, because eyes were always on the phone. And there were other reasons for that. But that a partner who's responsive, because that says, hey, I'm here. I'm available to you. I am reliable, and I'm engaged. You matter. Like, there's so much going on, I think, with each of these. And that's part of what drives basically these 6 things explain 45% of the average person's relationship satisfaction. So a chunk of it.
I love that. Yeah. So the other thing that I was curious too, though, and I think you're about to mention, relationships are mixed bags, right? And I think a big part of this question for people is, how bad is bad enough that it gives me permission almost to, go for the scorched earth option, when there are always consequences of doing that. And it's figuring out, the consequences of staying versus the benefits of leaving. And this uncertainty about what can improve versus, is this the way it is? Can you talk us through just some of the data or the things that you thought through as you were developing your assessment that can help get underneath some of those big existential questions? Because part of it comes down to values, it comes down to risk tolerance. So many different things. Where did you go with this?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So a lot of it, I did start with the data, looking at the factors that drive our relationship satisfaction the most, and some of the theory around just life satisfaction in general. And through that, one thing I think that's so difficult when someone is feeling stuck in a relationship and not sure what their next step should be is, we can question our sanity. Like, am I crazy? Like, everybody else says this person is wonderful, but, maybe they behave differently at home behind closed doors or things like that. So we can develop a lot of distrust in our own ability. And I would say, especially women are socialized to take responsibility for others and to feel like, oh, well, I can influence my partner to change. People don't change until they want to change. Just because we want them to change doesn't mean they're going to. And so in looking at the data and then trying to think about what some of the theory of relationships and satisfaction indicate, what I really came down to was, where is somebody who is living in that ambivalence. Where do they have control? Where do they not, or influence?
Mm-hmm.
And what of that is harmful versus helpful?
Mm-hmm.
And so if they can focus in on, and that's really what a lot of Partner Lab's mission is focused on right now, where our efforts are going, is helping people understand like how to communicate better with their partner, figure out what their own needs are. You talked about core values, I think, a second ago. And, you know, a lot of it starts there. Like, what are our core values? What do we need in our romantic relationship, in our relationships, and our personal needs, maybe outside of that relationship? And so we have some can influence, let's say, with our partner. We can ask for things. It's not our responsibility. It's not on us if they decline. And so helping them see where they maybe have less influence, but maybe could have a positive impact. And this is where we talk about communicating their needs and understanding their partner's needs. You know, it's got to be a two-way street for all of it. And then the other piece where they have less control is where it might be harmful. You know, maybe their partner is abusive in some form or fashion. Most recently, I was on the board of a nonprofit called Finability that empowers financially the survivors of domestic abuse. And even through that, I learned that 8, maybe 100% of people who are abused also get financially abused, because, you know, it's not about abuse. It's about
power
control.
and control. Yeah,
yes,
100%.
Exactly. Yes. So helping people figure out, like, where don't I have a lot of control, but where stuff is really bad for me. It's bad for my well-being. And, you know, if it's bad for us, it's probably bad for our partner. It's probably bad for our kids. And so helping people understand their deal breakers. And then on the flip side, where do they have control that they may not be exercising in a way that's helpful to them? So we talk about claiming their freedom to, you know, be authentic, and freedom to set boundaries. We talk a lot about how to set those boundaries, what they look like, and how to enforce them. And then the other piece where I get really, really excited is where we have high control and a lot of positive impact. And we talk about that as growing your peace. When I was going through my divorce, it was so hard. And when I was going through a lot of it, the mantra I came up with was peace and freedom, peace and freedom, peace and freedom. And so when things got really ugly, I was like, this is what I'm working for, both for me and for my kids, and in some respects for my co-parent. And so where we can claim that peace, where we can grow to recognize where we do have power and influence over our own lives, and do something about it, and not worry so much about what our partner is doing, because maybe they're going to show up and put a lot of effort into the relationship, but it's not our job to police them. We need to keep our eyes on our own paper, right? And I think too many people, and especially women, think they have to take responsibility for their partner's choices and behavior, and nothing could be further from the truth. So helping the individual get really specific with themselves about where they have influence, where they don't, where it's positive, where it's negative.
Yeah, that's great. Like a 4-quadrant matrix. I love it.
Yes, exactly. We call it the clarity matrix.
Yep. The clarity matrix. Clarity.
Yep.
So now my other question for you, and I don't know if I shared this with you at the beginning of the podcast. So my background, I'm a psychologist, but really I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I identify as an MFT professionally. I also am a board certified coach. But when I also hear these things, I with my marriage counselor hat on, I'm also thinking that, like, this is why people show up for relationship work. I mean, like, this is pretty garden variety stuff in terms of feelings of gratitude and appreciation, sexual satisfaction, responsiveness. And these things tend to be pretty coachable. I mean, like, two people coming in the door, like, we want to make this better. This is like what we do, right? And so I guess I'm curious if you've come across any research that is like, because what this assesses is this is where you are now, but is there also anything that shows you the possibility? Because I think most couples coming into any type of relationship counseling are dealing with quite a few of these, and that changes over the course of 12, 16, 20 sessions. in the hands of a competent support person, given that also, 90% of therapists doing couples counseling don't have a background in marriage and family therapy. And I think that that strongly influences the outcomes that people get in that process. Mm-hmm. So there is that variable, but like in the hands of somebody who's competent to create change in a relationship. Have you looked into that at all? Like,
yeah, go ahead. Sure. A lot of, I would say it comes down to, first and foremost, do both people want to improve the relationship? Yeah. It can't be one-sided. That just does not work.
Truly.
And then you waste your time and you spend a lot of time, energy, and attention hoping, when really that hoping is actually wishful thinking, because it's not going to be a two-way street. The other is probably two things. One, communication, and subsumed in that is negotiation or conflict resolution skills. And that's what I teach negotiation and have for a lot of years. And I love it. And it's part of what drew me to develop Partner Lab, because in my current relationship, like we have disagreements, but he has never, ever said anything unkind. We get to the bottom of it. We may not agree, but when we leave, it's like, we can hug and it's okay. We know, like it's a clean slate. And I think a lot of people don't experience that in their relationships. And it's because they don't have the knowledge or the skills around conflict to make it better. And then also communicating. Part of it is those bids for attention, and being, the older I get, the more I feel like authenticity and vulnerability are so important. And, all of these things, and I think you were kind of alluding to it earlier, are about connection. That's why we want relationships. And so if you feel like you can't share something because it's not safe to do so, or you're not going to be listened to, so sharing is irrelevant. Learning how to share in a vulnerable way, little by little, and especially I would say even when there's been significant breaches of trust, like knowing how to repair that breach of trust and repair the relationship. Those are huge. So I think a lot of it can be taught, but it's like anything in organizational behavior. We talk about performance is the intersection of ability and motivation. And I would say it's the same thing in relationships, right?
Yeah.
Both people have to be motivated, and then you can give them the skills and the knowledge and to, grow and get better together and separately. A lot of things can change, but I think there are, unfortunately, there are a lot of situations where one or both parties are like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that.
I don't want to do that. Yeah, no,
I and it is hard.
That.
It's hard. I went to counseling with my first partner, and it was hard, and I don't think it did any good.
Yeah.
But that communication, conflict resolution, and being able to bring our full self, that authenticity, super important. And sometimes, we weren't always raised with those skills.
Oh, absolutely. So, who is? My God.
No,
I mean,
never.
Everybody needs to learn that. But this is an interesting conversation. And I want to validate what you're saying. Something that we actually do a lot of at my practice, Growing Self, is related to this. It's called discernment coaching or discernment counseling, which is a type of relational work that is fairly obscure. I mean, even marriage and family therapists oftentimes haven't heard of this or learned about it, but the entire purpose of it is not to improve a relationship. It is coming together to determine, is there enough commitment, desire to improve a relationship? And it's really talking about like, okay, if this were going to get better, what would need to be different? And what does that look like? And do both of you want to do that? And that, because a lot of times without that, even marriage counselors will have a couple come in the door and just like assume that everybody's here to make the relationship better. And it is not true. Like one person is totally checked out and they're like, rah, 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 and without that, nothing can change. And so to establish that, like, yes, we both want to try actively for a period of 3 months and then see what is possible at the end of that time. But without that, you're absolutely, it is a total waste of everybody's time and money. and it's not going to work. So like, I think that that's so important because a lot of people, they don't, I think they don't know that and understand that you need to, get that almost like that consent to improve a relationship before trying.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would even take it a step further. I think we're apt, maybe as humans, maybe social media makes it worse for us to pay attention to what people say, and we don't pay attention to what they do. And really, it's about what they do, right? You can have a partner who's like, yes, let's go to marriage counseling, but behavior doesn't change, attitudes don't change, if you've got to. And so that's one thing I encourage my clients to do is like pay attention, not to what the person says, but to what they do, and make sure what you're saying matches what you do and vice versa. Because, lip service is super easy. And, what matters is their actions. Maya Angelou said something to the effect of, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I think that's super apt, especially in close relationships like romantic ones.
Yeah, definitely.
They're going to show you who they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think also too, what I'm hearing between the lines here is that I think you're also talking about relationship growth from a coaching perspective. Like I know coaching is part of your background. And I think that one of the things that's often very different about a therapy point of view is that talking about something in a session is the active ingredient in some ways. And coaches, like I am also a board certified coach and bring a lot of that energy into working with people. And I think the coaching perspective is that the talking about the thing is the starting point that is gaining awareness and clarifying what needs to change. But then there really does need to be follow through that happens outside of the session that is what actually changes the experience of the relationship, because insight isn't enough. And I think sometimes people can get stuck in a therapy, culture that prioritizes the articulation of something in a session over the actualization of the change outside. So I appreciate your saying that out loud, because you're right. There really does need to be follow through. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Action, not words. Words are fine, but action's got to be where it is. And then again, it's got to be both ways. It's got to be both people. We can't expect our partners to change and grow if we're not willing to do the same.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and this is interesting. And so, okay, so your assessment at the Relationship Lab, so it's taking a look at some of the most significant factors when it comes to relationship satisfaction and longevity. And so, like, is there a tipping point, or like, is your assessment actually making recommendations, or is it saying, compared to satisfied couples, here's where your relationship is rated right now compared to, like, how does this work? Because I want to know, like, what kind of information people might get from taking this assessment, but then also what do they do with that? Yeah.
Yes. Great question. So the assessment, it focuses primarily on those 6 factors that have the biggest impact on relationship health and well-being. And really those factors get broken down into behavioral, mental, and emotional, which is kind of a common framework for how people see relationships and experience them. And so with those, what we have done is collect data from respondents to basically kind of test out profiles, relationship profiles. So, you are familiar with Myers-Briggs and whether or not how reliable that is and valid. But this really hones in on those 3 areas, mental, emotional, behavioral, to help them see what does that say broadly about their relationship. And then what we do is hook them up. So like right now we're kind of characterizing each of these as either a strength or a weakness based on data and means and medians and things like that. And so, if somebody's weak in all 3 of those areas, behavioral, emotional, and mental, the profile that we give them is right now they're a survivor. They're in survival mode because nothing is going well. And so with each of those areas, behavior, emotion, mental, we give them specific feedback about like, hey, this is kind of what this assessment is showing about your relationship. Here's what you need to know the research says about that. So if you're in this kind of a relationship, this is the impact it has on your mental and physical well-being. And then also connecting them based on their profile with resources that hopefully they can use going forward. And so for some of it, actually, our long-term plan is to partner with therapists in every state to kind of hook people up. Because I think some people, they want to read the book. They're like, I just can't talk to somebody face to face right now. Like, I'm just not ready for that, but I'll read a book or I'll do a workbook or something like that. And so giving them various types of resources for where they are and for, where they may be financially, what they can swing. And so targeted, specific, both framing and context for what this means for them and for their well-being and their health. Which I would say you can also, that there's a ripple effect on your kids if you've got them, and where they can grow. And so for, people on the other end of that profile spectrum where they seem to have strength in all of those areas, we call those relationship the thrivers. And so there may not be necessarily anything concerning for them, but that doesn't mean they don't want to grow in their relationship. And so unique resources for those folks who are like, we're great, but you know what? I don't think we communicate actually that well, or we still we seem to stay in conflict more than we need to, or hold on to resentment, things like that. And so with each profile, based on those three kind of categories, mental, emotional, and behavioral, we give them context about what the research says about that and resources targeting that profile, depending on the mixture of those emotional, mental, and behavioral kind of factors.
Yeah.
Tell me if any of that didn't make sense.
Oh, no, that's wonderful. So it's really saying here, here's where you are, and this is what we recommend based on the results of this assessment, which in itself, I think is very helpful because, I don't know if this was true for you, but I've talked to so many people about this, is that just the hardest place is the ambiguity, that really literally not knowing what to do. And just all day, every day, what do I do? And trying different things and not sure if it's the right thing, right? And I think so just to have some guidance even around
Yes.
next steps.
That not being able to have clarity about, one, I think the way things are, am I perceiving something right in my relationship? I'll go off on a quick side story. In the last year or two of my first marriage, I seriously considered putting hidden cameras in the kitchen and other places because I thought this person is not treating me well. This person told me I was crazy. But after the fact, when I realized the things that were going on, I wasn't crazy. That I think that tells us something about how stuck we can get. And we see some things and we're not sure what to pay attention to. And maybe we're not sure what's even happening, what reality is. And I think that can really happen, especially in codependent or abusive relationships. You get so disconnected from reality that you don't trust yourself. And so that was part of the goal too, is, to give people knowledge about what the research says and to give them something that says, I'm not crazy. This is going on. And this is why I feel that way. Because sometimes you're like, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't think about wanting to end my romantic relationship. I'm a bad person. But when we can give them hard evidence that says, this is why you're experiencing this in the relationship, and here's what you need to know about what the research says. And here are some tools to help you either improve the relationship or take steps to get out of it. Or, maybe people are still a little ambivalent afterwards. They're like, well, there's some strong things in our relationship and there's some weak things. What does that, what does that mean? What do I want to do? And that's, I think, where things like the discernment coaching can be so helpful, because when you stay in that ambiguity, like I did for way too many years, once you're out of it, you're like, darn, those are years I cannot get back,
That's so hard.
and I don't want anybody to have to live in that any longer than they absolutely have to. And so, with the assessment, it's not a situation where it's going to say, oh, you're in a great relationship or you're in a cruddy relationship. It's going to give you some more nuance. And I think that's really important because people, a lot of the clients that I've talked to and friends, they go to Reddit or somewhere to say, this is my situation and what should I do?
Or talk to GPT at this point,
yes,
right?
Exactly. Yes.
What do I do?
And, ChatGPT has its own bias, and Reddit, it seems like on there, I kind of lurk around there just to see what people are grappling with and understand what are the next tools that Partners Lab should build for people. Almost always it's like, ditch them, break up. And, sometimes that's valid, but you don't know who this information is coming from. They don't know you. They don't have your best interests at heart necessarily. And so, really helping people own their decision. None of the tools that we provide tell people really what to do. We arm them with the research and with tools and help them get, Partner Lab's tagline is clarity, confidence, hope, because you can't have confidence until you have clarity. You can't have hope until you have confidence. And so that's the goal, is to help them get that clarity about their relationship and the confidence to say, okay, we can make this better. I know my partner's willing to put in that effort. Or to say, what, things have gone beyond repair, or I'm not willing to put in the effort, because that's, telling too. And we both contribute to whatever the dynamic is. So we both bear responsibility. But, so.
Oh, that's so good. And can I just highlight something that you said a couple of minutes ago about how hard it is to even understand your own experience after a while, because I think that we can get habituated to things that are happening. Like it sort of feels normal what's going on. Like maybe it doesn't feel good, but it's our life. So like, what do you compare it to? And I think that this is especially true for people who may be coming out of family origin experiences or relationship history where this was familiar, right? And now it's happening in their current relationship, and to have a more objective yardstick by which to measure their own experiences. Because if you don't trust your own judgment, that just to get that like reality testing almost, as well as the information for the purpose of creating clarity and confidence and hope. That's really
that was
good.
exactly why I wanted to put hidden cameras in my home. It's like to show a friend, it's like, is what I think is going on here going on?
Yeah.
And we do. I mean, none of these, if somebody treated us really badly on a first date, hopefully we would not see them again. But these things are slippery slopes. It's like boiling a frog. Definitely. And so we do get, and I love that you pointed to the family of origin. There's a few people in my life that I've told them that the first time I got married, I married my mother. There's a lot of overlap between the way my first partner saw the world and behaved and my mother. And so understanding how those affect us now and, where we have influence and maybe where we don't. But that familiarity, I think, is something more of us should understand, because just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's love, doesn't mean it's good. And I love Thich Nhat Hanh's quote, people have a hard time letting go of their suffering out of fear of the unknown. We prefer suffering that is familiar.
Can I ask you a semi-personal question? If you don't want to answer this publicly, I will retract the question. So you mentioned when we started talking that you became aware that you stayed in your marriage probably 10 years longer than you should have. Just to give visibility into this and hopefully to help some of our friends here with us feel seen, would you mind talking a little bit about the things that were holding you there and that what you know now were the reasons that make things like you should have listened to more at that time? Does that feel okay to talk about?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And you can ask me questions too. Yeah, well, okay.
Sounds good. I think, the biggest thing, I stayed in the marriage because I was convinced that was what was best for my children. My parents had divorced when I was 9. They are both still as bitter about the other one, 40 something years later. And I was like, I don't want my children to go through that. Like when I got married the first time, it was like, this is freaking forever not doing this to my children. And I still remember, 9, 10 years later, having a moment, and I don't remember what surrounded the moment, what was going on, but standing in the kitchen of my home and recognizing, oh crap, my children are learning super unhealthy relationship dynamics by watching me and their dad. And so that just for me flipped a switch that staying for the children may sometimes be the best thing and other times not. And I'll be frank, I've seen my children play out some of those dynamics in their relationships, which to be frank, it just like, it breaks my heart. It's like, oh, if I have any guilt, it's like that I didn't leave sooner because I just hate what they learned. Because we do learn those dynamics as a kid and we don't realize what we're picking up and what then we're kind of going back to. And now my brain has gone off somewhere and I forgot what your question was.
No. Yeah, I mean, but no, I appreciate you saying that because I think that is one of the messages in our culture that even if you personally are not having a great time in a relationship, there are still benefits for having an intact family for the benefit of the children. And I think that there are certainly different things to consider there. And it's sometimes it can be true, but what I'm hearing you say is that if they are witnessing and then replicating relational dynamics that they have them absorbed, this is normal, right? Like that has been imprinted on them and then they will go do that. That can be really, really hard. And I thank you for sharing that. I feel for that. I think, and I don't know, maybe this is getting too deep and dark, Dr. Merideth, but I think, what I also see and hear people thinking about is, okay, so I leave this relationship and I'm having a better time and they're not seeing me and my partner do the same type of conflict. But now my kids are going to have to go 50% of the time and be alone with this person who I know is mentally and emotionally abusive. And now I will not be able to protect my kids from having the experience that maybe I was buffering when we were all in the same house. So now they're going to be alone with this person who I don't want to be with. And that is a huge conflict for a lot of people. Like they would rather, be able to shield their kids from what their kids would experience by spending 3.5 days and every other holiday, So, and I don't, that's probably a topic for a different podcast, but it's really hard.
It was definitely something I thought of. And somewhere along the way, I think a friend of mine noted, Meredith, you can't take care of your boys unless you take care of yourself first. Like if I wasn't whole and healthy, I could not show up the right way for them. And really what it was, now that we're talking about it, I remember just thinking, I don't want my boys to think that it's okay for them to treat a partner this way or for a partner to treat them this way. And really getting down at kind of like that granular level with them and their future relationships, just, it made a difference. It didn't mean it wasn't hard. Like, it's never, I don't think it's ever easy, even the amicable divorces. But I actually, I'll tell you one other little side story. I have a colleague who I don't really know that well. And he was talking with another colleague of mine, a friend, Nicole, and she met me right after my divorce. And she was, as she says, girl fanning to this other colleague. And he was the male colleague. He was like, well, Nicole, like, when did you meet Meredith? And she was like, oh, this year, whatever, 2017, 2016. And he was like, so you didn't know her before the divorce? And she was like, no. And he put his hand down low to the table. He said, this is Meredith pre-divorce. He said, this is Meredith post-divorce. And, my career has taken off. I have much healthier relationships broadly. Life isn't perfect. Relationships aren't perfect. But my boys, especially the one in college at that time, could see the difference.
Totally.
Yeah. So,
That's such a powerful statement, because I think for a lot of people, looking at this, it's this leap, right? It's like jumping off a cliff. Like, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. And so to hear stories like yours around, I was scared and I did this, and here's what it made possible for me, I think is incredibly encouraging. And also that, I think there's a couple of different ways of looking at that, like what is best for the kids argument, because I mean, I think you brought up a really good point, like to send a very clear and overt message to kids around healthy people do not stay in this type of relationship. And so this is what we do is also can be a role modeling, and then to witness your development on the other side of that is also probably instructive for them. So like there's different ways of looking at that kids conversation.
The kids issue. Yeah. I think for most people, that's the hardest thing. And I think the financial aspect is really hard.
Yeah.
I live in Utah and especially in Logan, where the university I teach at, most women are stay-at-home parents. And so there's so many of them that I'm aware of that want to be out of their marriage, and they don't feel like financially, like they haven't necessarily worked outside the home in 15 or 20 years. And that's really tough. But there are resources. And that's another thing that we point people to, is where you can get information, where you can get resources, because life is too short just to survive. We got to thrive. Yeah. That's one thing that I will say I learned from my own research with work family issues is our romantic relationship has the biggest impact on every aspect of our life, either for good or for evil.
For sure.
And so
1,000%.
So, just sticking in one, trying to survive, that was one thing that was really a wake-up call to me. A former partner said, "You'll never find somebody who loves you as much as I do." After I said, I want out. And in that same moment, I thought to myself, I didn't say it out loud. I thought, I'd rather be alone than stay in this relationship. And then I thought, well, I need to find a friend with benefits. But anyway, so, asking ourselves questions like that of, would I rather be alone than be with this person?
Yeah.
Being alone could be amazing. It doesn't have to, it's not a signal of your worth. And when I recognized that moment was a turning point too. Like I would rather be by myself for the rest of my life than be with this person.
That is important information.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And only we can ask ourselves or answer that for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, but I also think, having conversations like this one and just making some of these, dark places that often go unsaid and making them visible, saying them out loud, is a very important part of the process of helping somebody get clear about their own values and their best path forward. And so that's in addition to your assessment that you have developed that provides data, then follow-up information, you also have a community system. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I feel like that's actually what we started talking about just now between you and I, is like sharing some of the stories, and like this was the turning point for me. And I think especially because when things are feeling super hard in relationships, well, I don't know. I think it can split one of two ways. Some people will tell everybody, including the cashier at the grocery store, about like, let me tell you, they did this, so like there's that. Yeah. But I think a lot of people keep it hidden, right? And also there can be wisdom, like every relationship has friction, ups and downs. And so you don't want to be constantly telling people all about the low lights and spoiling the well, because then the next time your friends look at your partner, they're like, oh, that person. And you're like, yeah, no, it's better now. We moved on. So like there's that. So there can be wisdom and privacy, but at the same time, to be able to have people to talk to, like, is this normal? And hear like other people's stories, especially if somebody is further down the developmental path, that can be so instructive. And it sounds like you're developing that.
Absolutely. We think that's one unique aspect of the clarity circle is, so often we aren't comfortable, don't want to talk to people we know directly, family, friends, about struggles in our relationships. One, because maybe we're afraid they're going to tell us to get out and we haven't made that decision yet, or they're going to say, no, you need to stay in. And we are thinking we want to get out. There's a lot of trickiness and messiness there. And so connecting people with others who either are in a similar situation or who have been to one, I think the biggest maybe first factor there is just knowing they're not alone. I know when I was going through my process and 10 years in ambivalence, I just felt so freaking alone and clueless. And to know you're not alone, that's empowering. This isn't just me. I'm not crazy. So right now it's a community where people can connect with others who are similarly situated to share emotional support. Everybody on the Partner Lab team has been through something similar. So everything we develop and the interactions we foster are with that lived experience, empathy kind of at its core. And one of our goals is over time to build that community out to where there are also like mentors, people who have been through the hard stuff and come out the other side, either out of the relationship or stayed in it. And so that people can also see like, I think it's also not good and why I would never encourage anybody to go to Reddit because it's all just negative. So the goal,
yeah, totally.
The parameters around the community, the community circle are, we don't show up here just to whine and complain. We're here to provide each other emotional support and connect people with resources and things like that. So we don't want it to show up and just be a gripe session, but it's something that uplifts people, helps them feel seen and heard and understood, and they can help each other because, it feels good to help somebody else.
It really does. No, that's good. And I'm glad that there's the positivity because and also to have messages of hope from people who I ended a relationship and best thing I ever did. But also, you know what? We went through a really rough patch and it was looking bleak and we got the right help at the right time, changed everything. And we're in such a nice place now. Like, I think that is really valid as well. But, just to get the right type of support at the right time, no matter what the path forward looks like.
Yeah, so absolutely. And I think one other piece of that's really important to us is connecting people with people they don't know, in part because people who know us, they have a vested interest in whatever we do, right? Like if they're our parents, they're like, oh, we want you to stay with that person. Or they're like, we never liked that person, get out. Like, they have an interest in our decisions. And sometimes that's helpful, but sometimes it's not so helpful. And so to have somebody who has a little more objective perspective and can also just be a listening ear, I think is super important.
Amazing. Well, Dr. Merideth, it has been such a pleasure to speak with you and just get to know you. And thank you for sharing your, not just the information about your assessment, but also sharing your story. I mean, it's really such a powerful story. And so if people wanted to learn more about you and the relationship lab and everything that you're doing, not the relationship lab, the partner lab,
right?
Partner lab, where would they go and tell us more?
Sure. Big picture, they can go to mypartnerlab.co, and there they will find links to the free assessment that will give them a profile of their relationship and connect them with resources. There's also another relationship assessment that's much more nuanced and finely grained that looks at a whole lot of different things. So if they want to get a more nuanced picture of where things are going well in their relationship, and then there's the Clarity Circle, where it's really designed on helping, first and foremost, people who feel like they've been stuck in that ambivalence for a while to help themselves get clarity. And one thing I want to be super clear about is participating in the Clarity Circle. One, you do it at your own pace. So a lot of this stuff is really hard mentally and emotionally to think about. And so people go at their own pace. There is nothing in Partner Lab or the Clarity Circle that's going to tell you what to do, where to stay or leave. So it is your decision. And so it takes people through our framework, the clarity matrix, to help them get that clarity for themselves and make their own decision. Because, whatever decision we make, we have to own it. If it's somebody else's decision for us, that's just not going to go well. And so, yes, we hope hope to build out more resources. Right now we're focused really on helping people decide about their current relationship to make it better, to get out. But eventually the goal is to expand it to people who started dating. When I started dating, I had it after my divorce. I hadn't dated since high school. And so I was clueless. And so, yeah, just, I know how transformative my relationship has been to my life. And we want other people to have a similar experience. So hopefully there are broader resources coming later, but right now we're focused on those who are feeling stuck and who want to improve their relationship. I would say, if somebody knows, and we all kind of know where some of the strengths and weaknesses in our relationship lie, but the clarity circle, I think, is also good for those who are like, I want to take my relationship to the next level.
Yeah.
So
nice.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Merideth, for coming and speaking with us today. This was a very interesting conversation.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's great to meet you.